Once the Egyptian slaves were released, Pharaoh had a change of mind. He questioned his own decision to let the Hebrew people leave and began to chase them with his horses and chariot and catches up with them in front of the Red Sea. They're at the crossroads, the Hebrews. On the one hand, they could be lynched by the Egyptian forces. On the other hand, they would drown in the waters of the Red Sea. But apparently, they no longer tolerated slavery. That was very fresh in their memories, and decided to throw themselves into the sea. And the miracle of the parting of the waters occurred. God told Moses to raise his rod to produce the partings of the waters of the Red Sea. And according to Hebrew tradition, that happened only after a certain Nachshon ben Aminadab threw himself into the waters. In other words, salvation came after the Hebrew people demonstrated their courage to fight against the waters. Chariots were an instrument of war perfected by the Egyptians and feared at the time as much as the use of horses, and therefore the fear of the Hebrew people when they were persecuted showed no way out, because here were the extraordinary chariots after them, and on the other hand, the waters of the Red Sea. According to the Torah, how many Hebrews came out of Egypt? They were 600,000 adult males, in addition to women and children. On the other hand, what was the number of chariots? 600. One chariot for every 1,000 Jews. That proportion surely must have been considered by the Hebrews then. And notwithstanding the numbers of victims that they would suffer, they would surely have emerged victorious from a confrontation. During World War II, we witnessed how a handful of Nazi soldiers subdued hundreds of Jews. Although the soldiers were armed to their teeth, while the Jews were unarmed, the disproportion between the soldiers that guarded them and those that were being oppressed was such that they would have come out victorious. Maybe many of them would have died in some kind of confrontation instead of all of them dying. However, it seems that slavery and forced domination have a psychological effect, produce a sense of incapacity, promotes submission, resignation, and sort of leave it to their fate. This is their fate and that's it. In our own lives, many times we find obstacles that seem to be insurmountable. We cannot execute any of them in our project of life. If we were to analyze the difficulty carefully, divide it into parts, maybe you could often arrive at a plan to overcome the situation. Previous struggles and failures often prevent us from trying to face the problem directly, face to face. With the new experiences we acquire, maybe there is a solution. The worst we can do is simply submit to a preordered fate already. There is no problem that doesn't have some kind of solution. There's an American saying, death and taxes have no solution, but everything else maybe does have a solution. So don't be resigned because of past failures. Don't look at the problem as so big that you will never be able to overcome it. I am sure that with thought, with decision, with being constant, you probably can find a solution to most of the problems.